What if your dream was taken away before you ever had the chance to prove yourself? Imagine working your whole life for an opportunity, only to have it ripped away for something you didn't even do. That's exactly what happened to Connie Hawkins, banned from the NBA before he ever played a game. But he refused to let that define his legacy. He was forced to find another way to prove he belonged. His story isn't just about basketball, it's about fighting for justice when the world tells you no. By the end of this video, you'll see just how he fought back and if he was able to overcome it all. If the world unfairly took away your dream, would you fight to get it back? Brooklyn, New York, 1950s. Crime was high and opportunities were low. Racial tension filled the air. Gangs controlled corners and violence was part of everyday life. Police patrolled, but protection wasn't guaranteed. The city was still recovering from World War II, but segregation and inequality remained. Kids grow up fast or not at all here. The city is a battlefield. Dreams don't just fade here, they get crushed under the weight of survival. Connie Hawkins knew the risks. One mistake can change everything. The playground is his escape, but Hawkins isn't naive. He knows what happens to kids who don't make it. Some vanish into the streets, others get lost in the system, and some get caught up in something much worse. At home, he hears whispers of change. The civil rights movement is rumbling, its voice growing louder. Protests shake the streets, marchers demand justice. On TV, he watches men and women fight for a future they may never see. The world is shifting beneath his feet, and he wonders where he belongs in it. But one thing is clear, basketball is his escape, his way out. The plan is simple: earn a scholarship, dominate in college, make it to the NBA. At boys' high school, his team bulldozed through the competition, rolling to an undefeated season and a championship. He was the best player in the city, maybe the country. College scouts packed into the stands, their eyes wide, their notebooks filled with the same two words: future superstar. But there was a problem. College basketball was a closed system, its doors controlled by a select few. Scholarships for black players were scarce, and powerhouse programs rarely recruited from neighborhoods like Bedford-Stuyvesant. Then came a lifeline, the University of Iowa, a scholarship, a ticket out. Leaving Brooklyn wasn't easy, but Connie knew what was at stake. So he packed a suitcase, shook the hands of friends he might never see again, and stepped onto a train bound for a world where the gyms were spotless, the crowds were huge, and the dream he had chased since his childhood felt within reach. He thought he was turning the page to the next chapter of his life. But what he didn't know was that his story was about to be ripped apart before he even had a chance to finish it. Connie had barely unpacked his bags at Iowa when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was tense. A scandal was ripping through college basketball, a massive point-shaving scheme unraveling in New York. The FBI was swarming, pulling in players from different schools, chasing down leads. Careers were crumbling overnight. Then came the gut punch. His name had been mentioned, not as someone who shaved points, not as someone who took money, just a name drifting through the chaos. And that was enough. Before he could ask questions, before he could defend himself, the decision had been made. Hawkins is banned from college basketball. No hearing, no appeal, no chance to fight back. And the NBA? They wanted nothing to do with him. No team would risk signing a player with his name attached to a scandal of this magnitude. It didn't matter that he was innocent. So what do you do when everything you've worked for is taken away? Connie had two choices. If there was one thing Connie knew how to do, it was adapt. If the NBA wouldn't let him in, he'd find another way to keep his dream alive. The American Basketball League, the first stop on his journey. It wasn't the NBA, it wasn't even close, but it was professional basketball, and right now it was the only league willing to take a chance on him. The moment Hawkins stepped on the court, it was obvious. He was too good for this league. At 6'8", with hands the size of catcher's mitts, he played like he was built in a lab. A blur of power, finesse, and quickness. He didn't just score, he danced through defenders, gliding with a grace no big man should have. He put up 28 points per game as a rookie, bullying anyone who dared to guard him. And just when it seemed like he was finally carving out a path, the rug was pulled from under him. The ABL shut down. One season. That's all he got. 1 year of proving himself, only to end up back where he started. Then something happened. The Harlem Globetrotters. They weren't a real basketball league. They were basketball's traveling circus, playing for laughs as much as points. Packed arenas, dazzling trick shots, behind the back passes, and high-flying dunks. It was entertainment, a spectacle built for the crowd. For Connie, it wasn't the NBA. It wasn't even serious competition, but it was an opportunity. For 4 years, he wore the uniform, played the part, smiled for the cameras, nailed the rehearsed plays, and gave fans a show. But deep down, he knew he was wasting his prime. While Connie was playing in exhibition games for laughs, the NBA was evolving without him. The 1960s were the golden age of big men. Wilt Chamberlain was rewriting the record books. Bill Russell was stacking championship rings. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was on the rise, ready to take over the next era. And Connie, he wasn't even part of the conversation. It didn't matter that he was still one of the most gifted players in the world. The NBA had blacklisted him. No team would touch him. No owner would take the risk. He was a name no one dared to say out loud. So he kept grinding, kept proving himself. After leaving the Globetrotters, he drifted through basketball's forgotten corners, teams no one had ever heard of. He played in dimly lit, smoke-filled gyms where the air was thick with the smell of cheap beer and sweat. The stands were half empty. And his opponents? They were guys who laid bricks and poured concrete by day, then laced up their sneakers at night. And yet, no matter where he went, he dominated. It didn't matter if it was a no-name league or a back alley gym. When the ball was in his hands, he was the best player on the floor, every single night, and people started to notice. Reporters, fans, even NBA players. The whispers grew louder. Why isn't Connie Hawkins in the NBA? And finally, after years of exile, the truth finally started to come out. It's 1966. Attorneys Rosalind Lippman and her husband S. David Lippman step into the fight for Connie Hawkins. They file an antitrust lawsuit against the NBA, arguing that the league and its owners have blacklisted him without cause. The NBA had refused to allow any team to hire Hawkins, who at the time, the Lippmans started working with him. Then, cracks begin to form in the NBA's wall of silence. Whispers turn into headlines and a storm of truth starts to build, one that the league won't be able to outrun. Journalists begin chipping away at the NBA's case, exposing just how flimsy its accusations are. And the biggest blow? A Life magazine article by David Wolf, laying out in brutal detail how there isn't a shred of real evidence linking Hawkins to gambling. The NBA is cornered. They know they can't win in court. And worse, a loss could set a precedent, one that might stop them from banning players who actually did break the rules. So instead of rolling the dice, the NBA gives in. After the 1968-69 season, the NBA settles. In 1969, they pay Hawkins nearly $1.3 million, which in today's world would be over $10.8 million. And most importantly, his ban is finally lifted. The weight of a decade in exile lifts, and at last he steps into the light. The moment finally arrives. Connie Hawkins' name is called, and his rights are assigned to the expansion Phoenix Suns, a team looking for a star to build around. The years of exile, the courtroom battles, the whispers of doubt, all of it fades as he grips the pen and signs his contract. This is what he's fought for, dreamed of. The Pipers make a last-ditch effort to bring him back, but there's no hesitation. The NBA has always been the goal, and now, at last, the league's doors are open. The city of Phoenix embraces him as their franchise star, and for the first time in a long time, Hawkins isn't fighting to prove he belongs. He's finally where he was always meant to be. But now the real test begins. Under the bright lights and the weight of lost years, can he still prove he belongs in the NBA? October 16, 1969. Hawkins stood near the locker room entrance, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, his fingers drumming lightly against his thigh. The buzz of excitement filled the air, but the tension refused to leave his body. This was it, his moment. Yet, as he watched his teammates jog onto the court, loose and confident, his own legs felt heavier than they should. Hawkins took his first steps onto the court. The ball is tipped, and suddenly it's real. The years of exile, the nights spent wondering if this moment would ever come. It all fades into the roar of the crowd. Hawkins moves across the court, the game pulsing through his veins. The floor beneath him no longer foreign but familiar, like an old friend welcoming him home. And then, he explodes. The finger rolls, the gravity-defying dunks, the impossible one-handed control. His game is unlike anything the NBA has ever seen. Defenders scramble, coaches shake their heads, crowds rise to their feet. He isn't just proving he belongs, he's proving he was always meant to be here. Hawkins doesn't ease into the league, he announces himself. He plays all 81 games, averaging 24.6 points, 10.4 rebounds, and 4.8 assists per game. In the final game of his rookie season against Elvin Hayes and the San Diego Rockets, he delivers a masterpiece: 44 points, 20 rebounds, 8 assists, 5 blocks, and 5 steals. The Suns finished third in the Western Conference, and in the 1970 NBA playoffs, Hawkins leads them into battle against the Los Angeles Lakers team stacked with future Hall of Famers: Wilt Chamberlain, Elgin Baylor, and Jerry West. In Game 2 of the series on March 29, 1970, he dominates, leading Phoenix to a 114-101 victory with 34 points, 20 rebounds, and 7 assists. For the series, Hawkins is relentless, averaging 25.4 points, 13.9 rebounds, and 5.9 assists while grinding through 46.9 minutes per game. His knees scream, his body begs for rest, but he pushes forward, unwilling to let time dictate his story. Hawkins was named first-team All-NBA that season. He was also a Western Conference starter in the All-Star game. He was tied for 5th in MVP voting that year. Hawkins never takes a single day in the NBA for granted. After spending so many years fighting just to get his shot, he refuses to waste a second of it. For years, he's been labeled a basketball outcast. Now, he's an all-star, a leader, a veteran presence every team wants, and he cherishes it all. In Phoenix, he becomes a fan favorite, helping turn a struggling expansion team into a contender. He soaks in the moments, the competition, the camaraderie that had been denied to him for so long. Even when injuries catch up with him, teams still want him around, not just for his skill, but for his presence. Because after everything he's been through, he's still standing, still proving he belongs. So when the Suns trade him to the Lakers, he doesn't see it as a demotion. He sees it as another opportunity, a chance to share the floor with Jerry West and Wilt Chamberlain, a chance to bring his unique style to another city that loves the game as much as he does. Later with the Atlanta Hawks, his minutes start to decrease, but his impact only grows. His younger teammates hang on to every story, every lesson, because they aren't just playing with an NBA star. They're playing with a legend who fought harder than anyone to be here. Due to countless injuries, Hawkins played in the NBA for only 7 seasons, leaving everything on the court, a relentless force even when his body begs for rest. And when the time finally comes to step away, there is no sadness, no what-ifs, only a legacy that refuses to fade. 4 NBA All-Star selections, the first Phoenix Sun to ever be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and most importantly, his name, forever carved into basketball history, right where it always belonged. Larry Brown, a Brooklyn native who played against Hawkins as a teenager and later became a legendary coach, put it best: he was Julius Erving before Julius. He was Elgin Baylor before Elgin. He was Michael Jordan before Michael. He was simply the greatest individual player I have ever seen. Years later, when Connie was asked how it felt to finally make the NBA after everything he had been through, he didn't talk about revenge. He didn't talk about bitterness. He just smiled and said, "Better late than never." His story wasn't just about basketball. It was about injustice, perseverance, fighting for what's right, even when the world tells you no. And in the end, even though the NBA tried to erase him, Connie Hawkins made sure they could never forget.